They say the worst betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the ones you call family, the ones who know your secrets, your weaknesses, your dreams, and mine. It came from my sister. I'm not talking about petty jealousy or little lies. No, my sister didn't just hurt me, she became me. She put on my skin, walked in my footsteps, and lived the life I had been building brick by brick while leaving me in ruins. And if you're listening right now, you're probably thinking, how is that even possible? How can someone steal your life while you're still alive to witness it? Well, buckle in, because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about identity. It's about envy so deep it turned blood into poison. But before I tell you how she destroyed me, I need to tell you who I was before the storm. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone. My parents worked hard, my father in construction, my mother we weren't rich, but we had dignity. And my sister, Clara. Oh, Clara was always the golden child. At least, that's how it seemed to everyone else. She had a smile that could melt stone, eyes that sparkled like she was in on a secret, and a laugh that made people feel like they belonged. Compared to her, I was quieter, more careful. I liked books, long walks, and daydreaming about the kind of life I wanted to build beyond our little town. And maybe that was my first mistake. I let Clara shine so bright, I thought my own light didn't matter. Still, she was my sister, and if you've ever had a sibling, you know it's complicated. Some days we were inseparable, whispering secrets under the covers, making promises that we'd always protect each other. Other days, she looked at me with this strange edge in her eyes, like I was both her mirror and her rival. I didn't pay much attention to it back then. Why would I? She was my blood, my family. But looking back now, all the signs were there. There was the time in high school when I won first place in the county writing competition. I was so proud. I'd worked for weeks, pouring my heart into that essay. Clara hugged me, congratulated me in front of everyone, but that night, I overheard her telling her friend on the phone, "It's not even that big of a deal. Anyone could have written that." It stung, but I brushed it off. Sisters bicker, right? Then there was the time I had my first crush. I'll never forget the way my hands trembled when I told Clara that he'd finally asked me to the school dance. She smiled, squealed, acted happy for me. But on the night of the dance, when I went to meet him, he didn't show. The next day, I saw Clara slipping into his car. When I confronted her, she shrugged. I didn't steal him. He chose me. Don't be mad at me for being irresistible. And I swallowed it. I told myself it was just teenage drama, that she didn't mean harm. That blood was thicker than water, but oh, how wrong I was. Because those little cuts, they were practiced. Clara was sharpening her knife, and one day, she would carve out a piece of me so big, I barely recognized myself after. You see, envy doesn't always come like a storm. Sometimes, it creeps in like a shadow, until suddenly you realize you've been living in the dark for years, and the shadow that was my sister was about to swallow everything I loved. Clara's shadow followed me everywhere, but I didn't want to see it for what it was. I told myself, that's just how sisters are. Sometimes you compete, sometimes you share. But the truth, Clara wasn't competing, she was preparing. College was supposed to be my fresh start. I'd worked hard, earned a scholarship, and when I packed my bags to leave that little town, I felt like I was finally stepping into my own story. For once, I wasn't Clara's sister. I was me. At orientation, people knew me for my achievements, not hers. Professors praised my essays. Classmates came to me for advice. I joined the debate club, and when I stood up in front of an audience, my words had power. My voice mattered. But then Clara decided to follow me, not just metaphorically. She applied to the same college, even though she had other offers closer to home. When I asked her why, she just smirked and said, "I didn't want you having all the fun without me." At first, I tried to believe her. Sisters stick together, right? But little by little, I started noticing patterns. I'd make a new friend, and suddenly Clara would be closer to them than I was. I'd wear a new outfit, and a week later she'd buy the same thing, just slightly better. I'd share a dream, like wanting to study abroad, and somehow she'd end up in the advisor's office before me, already filling out the paperwork. It wasn't just sibling rivalry anymore. It felt calculated. One night, in our dorm lounge, I overheard her laughing with some girls. She was telling them a story from my childhood word for word, like it had happened to her. They believed her. They called her so brave. And Clara just looked at me across the room, with this glint in her eyes, like she was daring me to correct her. I didn't. I froze, because part of me thought if I speak up, I'll look crazy. Who would believe that my sister, my own flesh and blood, was trying to erase me? But the little betrayals piled higher and higher. There was a professor I admired, someone who'd been mentoring me. I shared with Clara how much his guidance meant. The next week, I saw them walking across campus together, laughing. She never mentioned it to me, but I knew. And then there was Adam. Adam wasn't just another crush. He was kind, thoughtful, the type of man who actually listened. We met in a philosophy class, where late-night debates turned into coffee dates. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, really seen. So of course I told Clara, because that's what sisters do. You share. She smiled, hugged me, and said, I'm so happy for you. But within weeks I noticed things. Adam started canceling plans, saying he was busy. When we did meet, he seemed distracted. One evening, as I walked past the library, I saw him inside, with Clara. She was leaning in close, laughing at something he said, touching his arm, in that way she always did when she wanted attention. My stomach dropped. When I confronted her later, she shrugged. You're overreacting. We were just studying. But the way she said it, the casual tone, the smirk playing on her lips, I knew. I just didn't want to admit it. That was Clara's genius. She didn't have to steal things outright. She made me doubt myself until I handed them over willingly, and it worked. By the end of sophomore year, I felt invisible again. My friends were drifting toward her. My opportunities seemed to slip through my fingers. And Adam, well, he wasn't mine anymore. But here's the thing about betrayal: it doesn't just happen in one big, explosive moment. It happens in whispers, in shadows, in small decisions that seem harmless at the time. And Clara had mastered it. Still, I kept forgiving her. I told myself, she's my sister. Family is everything. I didn't know then how much those words would cost me, because Clara wasn't done. She wasn't just borrowing pieces of my life. She was building a plan to take all of it. And the first real crack, the one I couldn't ignore, came junior year. It was a rainy afternoon when my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the internship program I had been dreaming about for months, a competitive spot at a publishing house in New York. My heart raced as I opened it, expecting either acceptance or rejection. But what I saw stopped me cold. Thank you for your application, Clara. It read. Clara. Not me. I sat there, in stunned silence, the rain hammering the window, reading the words over and over. My name wasn't there. Hers was. I had told Clara about that internship. I had shown her the deadline, the forms, even the essay draft I'd been working on. She hadn't said a word, not one hint that she was applying to. And now, she had submitted my dream as if it were hers. I confronted her that night in our dorm room, shaking with rage. Why would you do this? You knew how much this meant to me. She didn't even flinch. She just leaned back on her bed, twirling her hair, and said, it's not my fault if we want the same things. May the best sister win. The best sister. Those words cut deeper than anything she'd ever said, because in her mind, this wasn't about love. It was a competition, a war, and only one of us could come out on top. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, realizing something I'd been avoiding for years. My sister didn't just envy me, she wanted to replace me, and deep down, I had a terrible gnawing feeling if I didn't stop her, she might succeed. That was the beginning of the escalation. The small betrayals were over. Clara was moving into full invasion, and I was about to lose far more than just a boyfriend, or a professor's attention, or an internship. I was about to lose myself. When I look back on those years, I wonder how I didn't see it sooner. Maybe it was denial. Maybe it was hope, that fragile little thread we cling to when we don't want to believe the people we love could be monsters. But Clara wasn't just dipping her toes into my world anymore. She was plunging headfirst, swimming in my waters, claiming the current as her own. It started small, again, always small. I'd overhear people saying, wow, Clara's such a talented writer. At first, I thought good for her. But then one day, I caught sight of the essay she'd submitted in class. My essay, word for word. She had taken my work, changed the title, and passed it off as her own. When I confronted her, she just smiled. You're better at writing than I am. What's the harm if I borrow a little? Besides, we share everything, don't we? Borrow, that was her word. She called it borrowing. But you don't return something after you've put your name on it. The lies grew bolder. There was a networking event at school, where I introduced Clara to a group of editors I'd been courting for months. I thought, maybe if she sees me succeed, she'll finally root for me instead of against me. But as the night went on, I watched her slide into the spotlight, telling my stories, dropping my ideas, sprinkling in just enough charm to make them forget I even existed. By the end of the evening, she had their business cards, she had their promises of follow-ups, and I was left standing in the corner like an extra in my own movie. And then came the day she crossed a line so deeply, I still feel the sting. I'd been applying for graduate fellowships. Quietly, carefully, I told almost no one, not even Clara. For once, I wanted something that was mine alone, but secrets never lasted long with her. One night, I came back to our shared apartment and found her at my desk, flipping through my papers. "Clara," I snapped, grabbing them. "What are you doing?" She smiled, that infuriating smile. "Relax. I'm just curious. Besides, you're such a perfectionist, I'd never manage half the things you do without sneaking a peek." Sneaking a peek. That's what she called it. I felt my blood boil, but I swallowed it down, because every time I tried to fight her, she had this way of twisting it, making me feel like I was the one overreacting. Have you ever had someone do that to you? Make you question your own sanity? It's terrifying. But the moment that truly broke me when I realized how dangerous this had become was with Adam. Yes, him again. Even after all the tension, all the doubts, part of me still held on to him. He was kind, and in my weakest moments, he still called. I still answered. Maybe I was a fool. Maybe I just needed to believe someone could choose me, even if Clara always got there first. One night, I got a text from Adam. "We need to talk. Meet me at the cafe tomorrow at 7." My heart pounded. Maybe this was the conversation where we'd clear the air, where he'd finally explain why he'd been drifting. I showed up. I waited and waited. 30 minutes passed. An hour. Finally, I got up to leave, and as I walked past the window, I saw him. Adam, sitting at a corner table, with Clara. Her hand was on his. His eyes were locked on hers, and when she laughed, he laughed too, like I had never been part of that story at all. I stood outside in the rain, numb, my breath fogging the glass. Neither of them saw me, or maybe they did, and they just didn't care. That was the night I stopped believing Clara's betrayals were just accidents. That was the night I realized she didn't want to share my life. She wanted to erase me and replace me. From then on, everything changed. I stopped trusting anyone. I stopped sharing my dreams, my ideas, my plans. I locked my journals. I memorized my passwords. I distanced myself from Clara. But it didn't matter because she had already started weaving herself into every corner of my world. Professors called her name when they meant mine. Friends invited her to events I'd told them about. Even my parents, during phone calls, seemed to gush about Clara's accomplishments that, in some twisted way, had started with me. Do you know what it feels like to fade while still being alive? To become invisible in your own skin? That's what Clara did to me. But the worst part, the world loved her for it. Because Clara was magnetic. She didn't just take things, she polished them, wrapped them in charm, and handed them back to the world like gifts. People didn't see a thief. They saw a star. And me. I was the shadow, the footnote, the girl who was kind of like Clara, but quieter. I wanted to scream. I wanted to expose her. But how? She was smart. She never left evidence. And who would believe me anyway? To everyone else, she was perfect. To accuse her would make me look bitter, jealous, unstable. And maybe that's what she wanted all along. One night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I had a terrifying thought. What if she actually succeeds? What if one day, there's nothing left of me at all? I brushed it off, told myself I was being paranoid, but deep down, I knew Clara wasn't done. She was only getting started, because when you live your whole life pretending, there's only one endgame left, to take everything, and that's exactly what she was planning to do. You know that saying, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Whoever wrote that never met my sister. Because what Clara did wasn't flattery, it was theft. It started with the internship. I thought maybe it was a fluke, an application mix-up, a coincidence. But when the acceptance letter came, and I saw Clara's name on it, I knew it wasn't an accident. She had stolen my essays, my recommendation letters, my carefully crafted words, and slipped her name where mine belonged. And the publishing house never questioned it, because why would they? On paper, Clara was me. I wanted to scream, to report her, but fear held me back. What if no one believed me? What if they thought I was jealous? Worse, what if I destroyed her opportunity and ruined my own reputation in the process? Clara knew exactly how to corner me. She counted on my silence, that summer. While she thrived in New York, sending back glossy photos of office parties, rooftop gatherings, the kind of life I had dreamed of, stayed behind, alone, invisible. And when she called me from her shiny new office, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, she said something I'll never forget. "You should be proud, sis. I'm living the life you always wanted, for both of us, for both of us." Those words haunted me. By senior year, Clara wasn't just stealing opportunities, she was stealing me. She opened social media accounts using my photos, my captions, my interests. At first, I thought it was some weird fan behavior, until I realized she wasn't posing as Clara, she was posing as me. My friends would say, "I loved your post yesterday," when I hadn't posted anything. Professors congratulated me on articles I never wrote. Even my own boyfriend, yes, Adam, again confused messages I'd sent with ones Clara had written. She blurred the line between us so completely that sometimes even I questioned which version of me people were talking to. The breaking point came one cold evening in December. I was walking back from class when a girl I barely knew stopped me in the quad. "Hey," she said, frowning, "why didn't you say hi to me at the party last night?" I blinked. "What party?" She rolled her eyes. "Come on, you were there. We talked for like 20 minutes. I shook my head. "That wasn't me." She laughed awkwardly, muttering something about me playing games, and walked off. But my stomach churned, because deep down, I already knew that it wasn't me she'd spoken to. It was Clara, pretending. From that night on, I started noticing things everywhere. Emails I didn't remember sending, assignments submitted under my name but not in my voice, conversations I supposedly had with people I barely knew. It was like living with a ghost of myself. And Clara, she reveled in it. One evening, when I confronted her, she smirked. "What's the big deal? We're sisters. We look alike. People get confused sometimes. It's not my fault if I can pull off being you better than you can, better than me." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about envy. Clara truly believed she deserved my life more than I did. The scariest part, she was convincing everyone else to. At family gatherings, relatives praised her for accomplishments that were mine. "Clara told us all about your paper being published." My aunt beamed, while Clara just smiled sweetly and accepted the credit. Even my parents beamed with pride at her stories, never once questioning whether they were true. And me, every time I tried to correct it, to claim what was mine, I looked bitter, crazy, jealous, exactly what Clara wanted. There's a kind of madness that sets in when the world stops seeing you as yourself. I started doubting everything, my own memory, my worth, my place in the world. And late at night, when I stared at the mirror, I sometimes whispered to my reflection, "Do I even exist anymore?" Because Clara wasn't just wearing my clothes or copying my words, she was wearing my skin. The turning point, the moment I knew I couldn't keep quiet any longer, came during graduation week. I had been selected to give a short speech at the honors ceremony. It wasn't the biggest award, but it was mine. Finally, something that recognized me. I spent weeks preparing, writing every word carefully. It was my chance to step into the light, if only for 5 minutes. But the night of the ceremony, when my name was called, I walked onto the stage and froze, because standing there, already at the podium, was Clara, dressed like me, smiling like me. And when she opened her mouth, she read my speech, word for word. The audience applauded, tears in their eyes, moved by my words, and I stood in the shadows, invisible. That was it. That was the moment. Something inside me snapped. Clara had taken my opportunities, my relationships, my dreams, but now, she was taking my voice. And I realized, if I didn't fight back, I would lose myself completely. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. Sometimes, it's the only place you can build from. That night, I made a decision. No more silence, no more shadows. If Clara wanted my life, she'd have to face me to get it. And for the first time in years, I felt something stronger than fear. I felt fire. By the time graduation passed, I thought maybe, just maybe, Clara had gotten what she wanted. She'd stolen my speech, basked in the applause, posed for photos with professors who believed she was the brilliant one. Surely that would be enough. But with Clara, it was never enough. Because once someone gets a taste of living your life, they don't want to stop, they want more. It began with paperwork. One afternoon, as I sorted through the mountain of forms for grad school and financial aid, I noticed something strange. My social security number had already been used. My account showed applications I hadn't submitted. I called the office, frantic, insisting there must be a mistake. But when they read back the name attached to the files, my blood ran cold. Clara, my sister, had used my identity, not just my ideas, not just my voice, my identity. I remember dropping the phone, my hands shaking so hard I couldn't breathe, because stealing opportunities was one thing, but this was criminal. I confronted her that night, my voice breaking with rage. How could you? That's fraud, Clara. That's my life. You're messing with my future. She didn't deny it. She didn't even look guilty. She just leaned against the doorframe, sipping a glass of wine, and said, "Don't be so dramatic. You weren't using it fast enough. Besides, I'm better at being you than you are. Better at being me." I wanted to hit her. I wanted to shake her until the masks slipped and the world could finally see who she really was. But instead, I crumbled, because deep down, I feared she was right. From that moment on, Clara stopped hiding. She signed documents with my signature. She opened accounts in my name. She even secured a job interview at a company I'd been chasing for months by pretending to be me. And when I tried to explain it to people, they looked at me like I was the crazy one. "Maybe it's just a misunderstanding," my mother said gently when I called her, my voice shaking. "You and Clara are so close, it's easy to confuse things. No one wanted to believe the golden child was capable of something so dark." But the breaking point, that moment I realized my sister was dangerous, came one night in the most ordinary of ways. I was at a cafe, working late, when a stranger walked up to me. "Hi," he said with a smile. "We spoke on the phone yesterday. You said we should meet here." I frowned. "I think you have the wrong person." He shook his head. "No, I'm sure. You're my name. You told me all about your publishing work." My stomach dropped. I had never spoken to this man in my life, but somehow, he knew details only Clara could have given him. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just impersonating me for jobs or school. She was impersonating me to strangers, to anyone who would listen. And one day, it wouldn't just be awkward confusion. It could be dangerous. That night, I went home and locked my bedroom door. For the first time in my life, I was afraid of my sister. Not just resentful, not just angry, afraid. Because if she could steal my identity, if she could lie so easily, what else was she capable of? But fear has a funny way of waking you up. I realized then that silence wasn't protecting me, it was killing me. So I started documenting everything, every email, every forged document, every conversation where she admitted things. I bought a notebook and wrote it all down, even the little moments that seemed insignificant, because one day, I knew I'd need proof. And though my hand shook as I wrote, I felt something stir in me against something I hadn't felt in years. But resolved, of course. Clara sensed the shift. She always did. "Why are you so quiet lately?" she asked one night, her eyes narrowing. "Don't tell me you're plotting something." I forced a smile. "Just busy." But she studied me, as if she could smell rebellion in the air. And I realized something chilling. In her mind, I wasn't her sister anymore. I was her opponent. The weeks that followed were a blur of tension. Every time my phone rang, I wondered if it would be bad news. Another account opened in my name. Another rejection letter for something I hadn't even applied for. Every time I stepped outside, I wondered who had seen Clara pretending to be me that day. And yet, through the chaos, I clung to one thought. She won't win. Not this time. But then came the night that nearly broke me. I came home from class to find my apartment door ajar. My stomach dropped. I stepped inside cautiously, heart pounding. At first, nothing seemed out of place, but then, I noticed my desk, my journal, my files missing. And on the floor, a note written in Clara's perfect script. "Stop fighting me. You'll only lose." I collapsed onto the floor, the note trembling in my hands, because it wasn't just about identity theft anymore. It was psychological warfare. She wanted me to give up, to surrender, to let her take everything. That was the boiling point. For years, I had let her chip away at me, one piece at a time. But that night, staring at her cruel words, I knew, if I didn't fight back, she would destroy me completely. And not just my reputation, not just my opportunities, my life. So I made a vow. I would gather proof, I would expose her lies, and I would reclaim my identity, no matter what it cost. Because if blood makes you family, then betrayal makes you enemies. And my sister, my own flesh and blood, had just declared war. War doesn't always start with armies or weapons. Sometimes it starts in whispers, in shadows, in the quiet moments when you decide you're done being preyed. For me, that moment came after I found Clara's note on my floor. Stop fighting me. You'll only lose. She thought fear would silence me, but instead, it became my fuel. At first, I moved carefully, like a spy in my own life. I bought a small lockbox and hid it inside the vents of my room. Every shred of evidence went in their bank statements, screenshots of emails she sent as me, even recordings of her slipping up in conversations. And yes, I recorded her. Call it desperate, call it sneaky, but when you're living with someone who's trying to erase you, you learn that survival sometimes means playing their game. Every time she looked at me with those suspicious eyes, I'd force myself to smile. Want me to make tea? I'd say casually, even though my heart was pounding. I had to make her believe I'd given up, because if Clara suspected I was building a case, she'd strike harder. The strangest part, as I watched her more closely, I began to see her cracks. She wasn't as smooth as she thought. One day, I overheard her on the phone, using my name to charm some recruiter. She laughed too loudly. She stuttered when they asked about my past experience. And when the call ended, she flung her phone across the bed in frustration. For the first time, I realized Clara wasn't invincible. She was desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. But her desperation only grew. One afternoon, I checked my credit score online, only to see it tanked overnight. Multiple new credit cards opened, a loan application submitted, all under my name. I felt the room spin. She was pushing harder, faster, like she could sense I was slipping out of her control. That night, I confronted her. Why are you doing this, Clara? You already have everything. Why take from me too? She smirked, her voice dripping with venom. Because I can, and because no one will ever believe you. They never have. That was her power. The world's disbelief. And for years, I'd let it cage me. Not anymore. I began reaching out quietly, strategically. I spoke to a professor I trusted, showing him Clara's forged applications side by side with mine. His brows furrowed, his lips pressed tight. I don't know how deep this goes, he admitted, but you need to protect yourself. Start with the authorities. Double quotes. Authorities. The word sent a chill through me, because turning in your sister even when she's destroying you feels like betrayal. But hadn't she already betrayed me 1,000 times over? Before I could decide, Clara escalated again. It was a Friday night. I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a woman's voice asked, "Hi, is this my name? You left your resume with us, and we'd love to move forward." I froze. I hadn't applied to that company, but I knew who had. When I asked her to email me the application she'd received, my suspicion was confirmed. There it was, my name, my contact information, but Clara's handwriting on the form. She wasn't just pretending to be me. She was creating a version of me that I didn't even control. That night, I cried harder than I had in years, not because she fooled them, but because I finally understood the truth. If I didn't fight her with everything I had, she wouldn't just steal my opportunities. She'd steal me, my very existence. And I wasn't about to disappear, so I made a plan. Step 1. Lock down my identity. I froze my credit, changed every password, closed old accounts. I even opened a P.O. box so she couldn't intercept my mail anymore. Step 2. Gather allies. I confided in a lawyer through a free legal clinic, explaining what Clara had done. He listened carefully, then said words that made my stomach churn. This is identity theft. If you have evidence, you can press charges. Charges against my own sister. I couldn't imagine the fallout. My parents would be horrified. The family would be split forever. But then I thought about the note she left me. Stop fighting me. You'll only lose. And I realized she had already split us. She had declared war. I was just fighting back. Of course, I couldn't let Clara see any of this, so in public, I kept up the act, smiling, nodding, pretending to be oblivious. But at night, I was building my fortress. One evening, I even followed her quietly, at a distance. She met with a woman outside a cafe, handing over papers. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I caught a glimpse of the folder. My name was printed in bold letters across the front. I snapped a photo from across the street, my hands trembling. More evidence. The tension in the apartment grew unbearable. Clara would watch me as I cooked, her eyes sharp, as if waiting for me to slip. She'd borrow my clothes without asking, leaving them stained with her perfume. Once, She leaned close and whispered in my ear, "You'll thank me one day, you know. I'm making you someone." I wanted to scream, but instead, I bit my tongue, because the more she underestimated me, the stronger my chances. And then came the twist I didn't see coming. One evening, as I scrolled through social media, a post caught my eye. There she was, Clara, smiling in a group photo, arm draped around people I didn't recognize. The caption, "Congratulations to my name on the amazing new position." My chest tightened. She hadn't just stolen my identity and paperwork. She was living it out in public, posting as me, telling the world that she was me. And people believed her. Dozens of comments poured in. "So proud of you. You deserve this." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. She was rewriting my life story in real time, and if I didn't stop her, soon there wouldn't be anything left of the real me to salvage. That night, lying awake, I whispered into the dark, "This ends with me. She won't win." But I knew what that meant. It meant stepping into a battlefield I'd avoided for years. It meant risking the family, the fallout, the shame. That it meant exposing my sister for what she truly was. Not a mirror of me, not the golden child, but a thief. And the war of shadows was about to come into the light. When you live in constant tension, you stop noticing the weight on your chest until suddenly, it crushes you. That's what happened to me. I had been moving in shadows, building my secret case, waiting for the right moment. But life doesn't wait. It throws you into the fire before you feel ready. And for me, the breaking point came on a night I'll never forget. It was a family dinner. My parents had invited us both, eager to celebrate all the good news. Good news. I knew what they meant. Clara had told them I had landed a prestigious new job. She had bragged about scholarships, opportunities, doors opening wide. And my parents, blinded by pride, believed every word. When I walked into their house, the table was already set with my favorite dishes. My mother beamed. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," she said, pulling me into a hug. And then she whispered, "Clara told us everything." My stomach twisted, because I hadn't told them anything. The evening dragged on like a slow-motion nightmare. Clara basked in their attention, raising her glass every time my parents toasted me. "To our brilliant daughter," my father said, his eyes shining, and Clara smirked at me over the rim of her wineglass, as if daring me to speak. I stayed silent at first, but with each lie, each stolen compliment, something inside me cracked. Finally, when my mother said, "You've made us so proud," my name, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I slammed my fork down. The table fell silent. "That's not me you're proud of," I said, my voice shaking. "It's her. She's been pretending to be me." The silence that followed was suffocating. My parents exchanged bewildered glances. Clara tilted her head, feigning innocence. "What are you talking about?" she asked sweetly. I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling. On the screen were photos of the fake applications, screenshots of her emails, the posts she'd made on social media, claiming my accomplishments as her own. I laid it all bare. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's face darkened. "But Clara," she laughed. "Oh, please," she sneered, dropping the mask for the first time in front of them. "You're just jealous because I'm better at living your life than you are. They should be proud of me. I'm the one making things happen." Her words hung in the air like poison. For years, she'd hidden behind charm, convincing everyone she was flawless. And now, finally, she showed her true face. But the most painful part, my parents didn't know what to do. My father said cautiously, "Is this true?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't act surprised. You've always wished she was more like me. Well, guess what? She's not, but I can be her, and do it better." I thought my parents would explode. I thought they'd defend me, finally, after all these years. But instead, they sat frozen, because betrayal like this within family doesn't compute. It breaks the brain. I looked at them, my heart pounding, and realized I couldn't wait for them to choose. I had to choose myself. So I stood up, my chair scraping the floor. "I'm done being silent," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "You've stolen my ideas, my opportunities, my name, but you don't get my future." "Not anymore," Clara scoffed. "And what are you going to do? Cry to the world? No one will believe you." I pulled a folder from my bag and dropped it on the table. Inside every piece of evidence I'd gathered, emails, documents, recordings. "Maybe no one believed me before," I said, my eyes locked on hers, "but they will now." The room crackled with tension. Clara's smirk faltered for the first time. "You wouldn't dare," she whispered. I leaned in. "Watch me." That was the breaking point, the moment the war of shadows became a war in the open. For years, Clara had convinced me I was powerless, that speaking up would only make me look crazy. But the truth, silence was her weapon, and breaking it was mine. Of course, the fallout didn't happen all at once. My parents tried to mediate, begging us to calm down, as if this was a simple sibling rivalry, but I knew better, and so did Clara. The battle lines were drawn. From that night forward, there was no going back. Later, alone in my room, I stared at the pile of evidence again. My hands shook as I whispered into the darkness, "This is it. The fight for my life starts now." And though fear still lived in me, something stronger rose alongside it. Defiance. Because sometimes you don't wait for the breaking point, sometimes you become it. Showdowns don't arrive with fanfare. They creep in, disguised as ordinary days, until suddenly you realize this is the moment everything changes. For me, it began on a rainy Tuesday morning. I walked into the legal clinic, folder clutched to my chest, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure the receptionist could hear it. Inside, that folder was every piece of Clara's betrayal, her lies, her forged documents, her theft of my identity, and inside me was a voice that whispered, "What if no one believes you? What if she's right?" But louder than that was another voice, one I hadn't heard in years. What if they do? The lawyer studied the papers carefully. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to anger. "This is extensive," he said finally, adjusting his glasses. "She's not just dabbling in impersonation. She's committing fraud, identity theft, and defamation. If you want to pursue this, you have a strong case. A strong case." The words hit me like a jolt of electricity. For so long, Clara had convinced me I was powerless, but here, in black and white, was proof that the power wasn't hers, was mine. The process began slowly, reports filed, statements written, meetings scheduled, and all the while, Clara carried on as if nothing was wrong. She still wore my clothes, signed things in my name, even updated her social media with my new successes. She strutted around the apartment like a queen, completely unaware that her throne was crumbling beneath her. But she noticed something. My silence. "You're awfully quiet these days," she said one night, narrowing her eyes, almost smug. "What are you hiding?" I smiled thinly. "Nothing." But inside, I was burning with anticipation, because for once, I had the upper hand. The first strike came from the university. Clara was summoned to a disciplinary hearing after duplicate applications were flagged. One legitimate mine, one suspiciously altered hers. I sat in the back of the room, watching her squirm as administrators confronted her. Her mask slipped, she stuttered, she tried to charm her way out, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. But when they presented side-by-side comparisons, her excuses crumbled. For the first time, Clara was exposed in a room where her charm couldn't save her. But the real showdown was still to come. It happened weeks later, when the authorities officially opened an investigation. I'll never forget the day officers showed up at our apartment. The knock on the door echoed like thunder. Clara answered, her usual smirk in place until she saw the badges. "Clara, last name?" one of them asked. Her face drained of color. I watched from the hallway as they explained the charges: fraud, identity theft, forgery. Each word was a hammer, shattering the facade she'd built for years. Clara spun toward me, her eyes blazing with betrayal. "You did this," she hissed. I met her glare with steady eyes. "No, Clara, you did this. I just stopped covering for you." The weeks that followed were chaos. Family calls at all hours. My parents sobbing, begging me to reconsider, to withdraw the complaint. "She's your sister," they pleaded. "Families forgive. But forgiveness doesn't erase stolen identities. Forgiveness doesn't undo years of gaslighting and erasure. And forgiveness doesn't work when the person isn't sorry." Clara wasn't sorry. She was furious. She left me voicemails dripping with venom, blaming me for ruining her life, as if she hadn't been trying to ruin mine all along. But here's the thing about showdowns. They aren't just about destruction. They're about clarity. For the first time in years, I saw Clara Clairla not as my twin flame, not as the golden child, not as the sister I once adored, but as a person who had chosen envy over love, control over sisterhood, theft over truth, and seeing her clearly gave me something she could never steal from me. Again, freedom. The final confrontation came in court. I sat on one side of the room, Clara on the other. She avoided my gaze, her once perfect hair disheveled, her hands fidgeting nervously. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, heart pounding, and told the truth. My truth, how she had stolen my work, my voice, my identity, how she had convinced the world I was nothing while she wore my skin like a costume. And when I finished, the courtroom was silent. Then the judge nodded. "Thank you for your honesty." It wasn't a victory parade. It wasn't applause or confetti, but it was something far greater. Validation. Clara received her sentence: probation, restitution, mandatory counseling. Some said it was too light, but for me, it wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about reclaiming myself, because for the first time, I walked out of that courtroom knowing I wasn't invisible anymore. That night, I stood by my window, watching the rain streak down the glass. The war was over, and though my heart ached for the sister I'd lost, I knew the truth. I hadn't lost myself. I had fought. I had broken the silence. I had stood in the storm and survived. And in that survival, I found something stronger than revenge. I found me. People think that once the truth comes out, once the lies are exposed, everything just gets better. But the truth is, after the storm, there's silence. A silence so heavy, it feels like walking through rubble. That's what my life felt like after the showdown. Clara was gone from my daily life, caught in the web she had spun for so long, but her shadow lingered. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, convinced she was standing in my doorway. I'd double-check locks, passwords, bank accounts. Every unknown phone call made my stomach twist, because betrayal doesn't just end when the betrayer is gone. It lingers, echoing in every corner of your life. And then there was my family. If I thought the courtroom was hard, the family fallout was worse. My parents called constantly, their voices breaking. "We don't know what to do," my mother wept. "You're both our daughters. How can we choose?" But they had chosen, hadn't they? For years, they chose to believe Clara's lies over my truth. They chose silence over confrontation. Now, standing in the wreckage, I realized something painful. They hadn't just lost a daughter to deceit. I had lost parents to denial. Family gatherings became impossible. Birthdays went uncelebrated. Holidays unspoken. The air between us was thick with grief and blame. At first, I tried to fix it. I wrote long emails, explaining again and again why I had no choice, why Clara's actions had left me with none. But my words were met with silence, or worse, with guilt. "Maybe you should have handled it privately," my father said once, privately, as if years of silence hadn't already been my prison. And there were the whispers. Neighbors who had once smiled warmly now looked at me with wary eyes. Coworkers asked cautious questions. Even friends shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to place me in their narratives, because society loves a villain, but it hates a messy truth. And my truth was messy. But here's the part people don't see. Amidst the wreckage, there are seeds. I began therapy, something I'd resisted for years. At first, I sat stiffly, arms crossed, convinced no one could understand. But slowly, word by word, I unraveled. I spoke of the nights I felt invisible, the years of doubt and gasp, the way my own reflections sometimes felt like a stranger. And instead of dismissal, I was met with something new. Validation. "You weren't crazy," my therapist said gently. "You were surviving." That word surviving hit me harder than I expected, because for so long, I had thought survival was weakness, that silence was cowardice, that breaking was failure. But survival meant strength. And for the first time, I began to see my story not just as a tragedy, but as proof of resilience. Of course, healing wasn't linear. Some days, I felt light, as though I'd finally shed Clara's weight. Other days, her voice echoed in my head, "I'm better at being you than you are." I'd catch myself avoiding mirrors, afraid of seeing her shadow in my own face. But then I'd remember the courtroom, the moment I stood tall, my voice steady, as I claimed my name back. That memory became my anchor. Slowly, I started rebuilding. I reopened doors I'd abandoned, applying to programs, jobs, opportunities I once thought Clara had poisoned forever. And this time, when I walked into interviews, I carried not just a resume but a story of survival, of strength, of reclaiming my voice. Some people shied away from it, but others leaned in, eyes wide, voices soft. "You've been through so much, and yet here you are." Yes, here I was. But the deepest aftermath wasn't about jobs or reputation. It was about me. I learned to sit with my own company, to write in journals again without fear of them being stolen. I learned to laugh freely, without waiting for someone to twist my joy into envy. I learned that my worth was not tied to what Clara stole, but to what I refused to surrender, and that was something she could never touch. As for Clara, I wish I could tell you she changed, that the confrontation opened her eyes, that she apologized, that we found our way back to sisterhood, but the truth, some people never change. Clara doubled down, blaming me for everything, painting herself as the victim. Even in counseling, she spun her tales. And maybe one day she face herself honestly, but that's her battle, not mine. Because in the aftermath, I realized something powerful. Her choices are not my burden. I am free. Sometimes, late at night, I think of the little girls we once were, sisters who whispered secrets in the dark, who shared clothes and dreams, who believed the world was big enough for both of us. And I grieve. I grieve the sister I lost, the childhood I can't get back, the years consumed by her lies. But grief, I've learned, is not weakness. It's proof that I loved. And though Clara betrayed that love, she couldn't erase it because my heart still knows who I am. And that's the aftermath. Not a neat ending, not a perfect resolution, but a messy, beautiful, painful truth. I survived. I reclaimed my name. And though the scars remain, they remind me not of what I lost, but of what I refused to surrender. Me. When I look back now, it feels like I've lived 1,000 lifetimes inside this one. The years of doubt, the gaslighting, the betrayal, they once felt like chains around my throat. But today, they feel like scars. And scars, as I've come to learn, aren't ugly. They're proof you survived something that tried to break you. I sometimes catch myself standing at the mirror, really looking, not with fear, not searching for Claire's reflection in mine, but with something I once thought impossible. Acceptance. The woman staring back at me isn't the broken version Clara tried to paint. She isn't the weak shadow my family mistook me for. She's me, entirely me, bruised, yes, but unbowed. There's a question people ask me a lot. If you could go back, would you change it? For a long time, I said yes. I wished I could erase every moment, every stolen opportunity, every lie whispered into the ears of those I loved. But the more I sit with it, the more I realized if I erased the pain, I would erase the strengths to. I wouldn't be who I am without the fire I walked through. And who I am now, I am strong, I am resilient, I am free. Healing wasn't just about moving forward, it was about reclaiming pieces of myself I'd abandoned. I started writing again, journals, essays, even small stories I once hid from Clara. Putting pen to paper felt like breathing fresh air after years underwater. I traveled, too, even if only to nearby towns, letting myself feel the joy of anonymity, of exploring places untouched by Clara's lies. And in those quiet journeys, I found something precious. Peace. Not the peace that comes from forgetting, but the peace that comes from surviving and choosing to live anyway. I'd be lying if I said forgiveness came easily. I wrestled with it, night after night, asking myself, do I forgive Clara? Do I forgive my parents? The truth is, forgiveness isn't a gift you give to those who wronged you. It's a gift you give yourself. So no, I don't forgive Clara in the way she might want. I don't absolve her or erase what she did. But I forgive myself for staying silent for so long, for doubting my worth, for thinking I had to earn love by shrinking. That forgiveness was the hardest, and the most liberating. As for my parents, I've learned to love them in pieces, to accept that they are flawed, that their inability to protect me wasn't malice, but weakness. I no longer wait for them to understand the depth of my wounds. Instead, I've learned to carry my truth without needing their validation, because my healing cannot depend on someone else's awakening. Sometimes, I still dream of Clara. In those dreams, she's always smiling, knowing, triumphant. But I wake up, and the sun is warm on my face, and I remind myself, her power over me ended when I chose to speak. And though her name may linger in the whispers of others, it no longer lingers in the way I define myself. That's the thing about survival. It reshapes you. I am not the same woman I was before all this. I am stronger, I am braver, and I am no longer afraid of my own voice. So, what's the lesson in all this? If I could speak to anyone listening, I'd say this. Never let someone else convince you that your story doesn't matter. Never let their lies bury your truth. And never, ever mistake survival for weakness. Survival is the bravest thing you'll ever do. To those who feel trapped in silence, I say this. Your voice is your weapon, your shield. your salvation. To those who've been betrayed, I say, you are not defined by what was taken from you, but by what you refused to give away. And to those standing in the aftermath, I whisper, the rubble will not bury you. From it, you will build again. As for me, I live quietly now. I write, I walk, I laugh, I breathe. Some days the past feels heavy, but most days it feels distant, like an old scar I can trace with my fingers, remembering but no longer bleeding. And maybe that's the best ending anyone could hope for. Not perfect, not painless, but free. So I close this chapter not with bitterness, but with gratitude. Gratitude for the strength I never knew I had. Gratitude for the freedom of owning my story. Gratitude for the future wide open, waiting, mine. Because in the end, Clara may have stolen pieces of my past, but my present, my future, those are untouchable. Those are mine. And if my story touched your heart, please, don't let it end here. Stories like mine are heavy, but they remind us of something important. We are never as alone as we think we are. So if you're still here, listening, thank you. Truly, you're part of this little family now. If you felt something today, give this video a like so it can reach someone else who might need it. And if you want more stories raw and from the heart, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Every week, I share another piece of life, sometimes painful, sometimes hopeful, always honest. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, no matter what's been taken from you, your story is still yours.